I remember the way my son's face drained of color. He looked at me like I had just spoken a foreign language. "Don't worry, Miles," I said, steadying my voice, though my heart was pounding. "This isn't your problem anymore. It's mine, and I've already signed the papers." He froze, mouth half open, eyes darting, waiting for me to take it back. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not after everything. You might wonder how a mother ends up here, saying those words to her only son in the middle of what was supposed to be a family gathering. I'll tell you. But first, I need you to sit with that moment. The silence, the serving spoon clattering onto the patio floor, the way even the wind seemed to pause in the trees. Because that's when I knew I wasn't the weak, disposable woman they thought I was. It didn't happen overnight. The unraveling came quietly, in small humiliations, in unanswered phone calls, in words tossed over shoulders as though they meant nothing. But the breaking point, that came at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday. When I was alone, clutching the side of my bed, a headache so sharp it felt like someone was driving nails through my skull. I reached for the phone. My hands shook. I called everyone, my children, my daughters-in-law. 1 ring, 2 rings, straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. Finally, a text buzzed through the darkness. 5 little words that sliced deeper than the pain in my head. "Family trip. Don't bother us." I lay there with the phone pressed against my chest, staring at the ceiling, trying to tell myself it was the hour, the distance, their busy lives. But the truth crept in like cold air through a cracked window. They didn't want to be bothered, not by me, not by my pain. So I did the only thing I could do. I called 911. The ER was lit too bright, the kind of light that makes every wrinkle, every weakness show. I remember gripping the thin blanket they gave me, listening to the beep of the machines, the shuffle of nurses' shoes. The doctor spoke kindly, his voice professional, detached. "It's stress, overwork, maybe your blood pressure. We'll run more tests." But it wasn't his words that stayed with me. It was the question a social worker asked at discharge. She was filling out forms, her pen scratching across the paper. She looked up at me with the softest eyes and asked, almost casually, "Who should we put down as your emergency contact?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My mind flipped through names, faces, children I'd raised, grandchildren I'd rocked to sleep, holidays I'd cooked for, bills I'd quietly paid, but none of them had answered that night. And in that sterile, humming room, with the taste of hospital salt still on my tongue, the truth pressed down on me like a weight I could no longer carry. I didn't have anyone left I could count on. That's when the seed was planted. The moment everything shifted, though I didn't fully understand it yet. There's something about being asked a question so simple, so ordinary, that it slices you open in the deepest way. I went home the next morning with a bottle of pills and instructions to rest. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it accuses. And as I set my purse on the counter, I saw it. A weathered manila folder tucked between old recipe books, the words scrawled in my late husband's handwriting, mortgage/title 2009. I didn't touch it, not yet, but it was like a whisper calling from the corner of the room. That same week, my daughter-in-law Joy called, her voice brisk, already moving on to her next thought before she finished the first. "We've been talking," she said, "about downsizing you into assisted living. It'll be easier for everyone. Everyone. Except me." I laughed politely, pretended I didn't hear the sharp edge in her tone. But that manila folder tugged at me every time I passed the shelf, and that question from the hospital echoed louder than her words. "Who should we put down as your emergency contact?" I want you to understand something before we go further. Stories like this aren't rare. They're just rarely told. If this touches something in you, if you've ever been left out, left behind, or left wondering where the people you gave everything to have gone, comment 1 below. Your silence is understood here. Because that Sunday, I sat at the dinner table with my son and Joy, still aching from the hospital, still clutching the memory of that folder like a lifeline. And then, Joy said the words, I will never forget. Sunday dinners used to be the anchor of my week. When my husband was alive, we had a tradition: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a pie cooling on the counter. He'd carve the meat while I fussed over the gravy, and the kids would run in and out of the kitchen, shouting, laughing, leaving muddy shoe prints on the linoleum. Now, the table is still the same oak slab he and I bought secondhand 40 years ago. Scratches, water rings, and all. But the voices are different. Quieter when they want me out of earshot, louder when they need something. I'm 66 now. I get up early, even on Sundays, because habits don't fade as quickly as people do. I still make coffee strong, fold laundry neatly, and keep the garden weeded. It isn't out of pride anymore. It's muscle memory. When you spend decades tending to others, it's hard to stop. Miles, my son, lives 10 minutes away with his wife, Joy, and their 2 kids. I was there for the births, the late-night calls, the colicky nights when Joy pressed the baby into my arms and whispered, "Please, I can't do this anymore." I took shifts so she could sleep. I drove them to daycare when she had early work meetings. I kept a running tab of grocery bills and utility payments, the little bridge money I slipped into Miles's checking account when he was short. I never once asked for it back. That's what mothers do, or so I told myself. Looking back, maybe that's when it started. The quiet erasure. The way sacrifices once expected became invisible. Joy was different from the start. Polished, ambitious, always looking 3 steps ahead. She had this way of smiling with her teeth, but not her eyes. I wanted to love her fully, and in some ways, I did. She's the mother of my grandchildren, after all. But she made it clear from the first Thanksgiving that I was a guest in her world, not family. That Thanksgiving I remember so vividly. I'd spent the whole morning roasting a turkey, basting it like my mother taught me. I showed up at their house, pie in hand, only to see another turkey already on the counter. Joy's turkey, seasoned differently, dressed up with sprigs of rosemary like a magazine photo. Mine was pushed to the sideboard, barely carved. Miles said nothing, just grinned awkwardly and said, "Thanks, Mom." It seems small, doesn't it? A turkey. But that's how it happens. The little reminders that your place in the family isn't at the center anymore. It's somewhere near the fringe, if at all. The Sunday after my hospital trip, I moved slowly, still shaken by the headache that had sent me to the ER. I set the table like always, but my hands trembled when I smoothed the napkins. I wasn't sure who would actually show up. Miles came, Joy beside him, the kids in tow. They brought a store-bought cake and that air of hurry I'd grown used to, always glancing at phones, always talking about the next trip, the next remodel, the next purchase. We sat down, and I tried to push away the image of that manila folder on the shelf, tried to ignore the echo of the social worker's question, "Who's your emergency contact?" But the silence at the table was thick. Joy broke it first, spearing a piece of chicken with her fork. "So," she said, her tone too casual, "we've been talking about the future, about what's best for everyone." I froze. I knew that tone. It was the same tone she used when she suggested moving my Christmas stockings to their house, for convenience. Or when she told me it might be time to pass down my casserole dish because she'd found one better suited for family gatherings. Miles cleared his throat. "Mom, we just think you'd be more comfortable somewhere smaller, easier to manage." Joy smiled tightly, pushing her hair back. "Yes, assisted living or one of those senior communities. It's what people do now. You'd have company, activities, less burden. Less burden. I felt my stomach twist. I thought of the nights I rocked their babies, the bills I paid in silence, the endless errands, the years of giving without keeping score, and now I was the burden. I didn't argue. Not then. I nodded politely, the way women my age were taught to do, even as my throat burned with words I couldn't say. After they left, the house seemed to sigh. I walked into the living room, sat down in my husband's old recliner, and stared at that folder again. Mortgage/title. 2009. I could almost hear his voice, steady and reassuring. Keep the papers safe, Marlene. One day you might need them. I thought about the lanyard key I kept hanging by the back door, the one I rarely touched. It opened the old lockbox in the closet. Inside were things I hadn't looked at in years. Birth certificates, tax forms, records my husband always insisted on keeping in order. That night, I stood in the doorway of the closet for a long time, key in hand. I didn't open it. Not yet. But something inside me had shifted. Because when your own family tells you you're a burden, when the people you gave everything to start planning your disappearance, you learn to stop waiting for their kindness. You start listening to the small, stubborn voice inside that says, "You're not done yet," and you're not powerless. The next Sunday dinner would bring more of Joy's words sharper than any knife in my kitchen drawer, and I realized I wasn't just sitting at a table anymore. I was sitting on a fault line. The ground beneath us was already beginning to crack. There are moments in life when the little cuts hurt more than the big wounds. A single slight word, a look that dismisses you, the casual shrug of someone you've sacrificed for. It can pierce deeper than any catastrophe. The week after that Sunday dinner, I tried to shake off Joy's comment about downsizing me. I told myself she was just being practical, that her brisk tone wasn't meant to wound. But deep down, I knew. Words like that don't slip out by accident, and soon, more little cuts followed. Christmas had always been mine. At least that's what I thought. Every year since my children were born, I'd made stockings, hand-stitched, names embroidered. Cinnamon rolls rose in the oven, the smell filling the house long before the sun. My grandchildren once called it Grandma's Christmas morning, and the phrase clung to my heart like a badge of honor. But last year, things changed. I had the stockings laid out, gifts wrapped, rolls rising. Then, late on Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed. It was Miles. "Mom," he said, his voice distracted, "we're doing a small Christmas tomorrow." Just us, nuclear family, you know? Joy thinks it's simpler that way. Less stress. Less stress. For whom? I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the lights on the tree. My cinnamon rolls collapsed in the oven, forgotten. The stockings stayed folded on the couch. And when I saw the pictures the next day, Joy posting their perfect little family in matching pajamas, the kids opening gifts I hadn't wrapped, I felt like I'd been erased from my own tradition. I didn't say anything. I smiled when I saw them later, handed out the gifts I had already bought. But inside, a hollow space grew. It wasn't just Christmas. It was every gathering. One Saturday in May, I got a text. "Mom, can you bring your potato salad, brownies, and maybe grab a case of beer on the way? We're doing a cookout." "No. Would you like to join us?" "No. We'd love to have you." Just a grocery list. I showed up with the food, of course. Old habits die hard. I placed the salad on the table, brownies on the counter, beer in the cooler. Then I sat down at the picnic table, listening to Joy laugh with her friends while I busied myself keeping the kids from spilling soda. When one of Joy's friends asked who made the potato salad, Joy smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, just something Mom threw together. She's good for that. Good for that." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted iron. It was like I'd become the hired help, needed when convenient, invisible otherwise. sentiu. The worst was the vague posting. I never liked Facebook much, but I kept it to see pictures of the kids, and that's where I first noticed it. Joy's little comments dripping with implication. Some people don't bother with family anymore. Sad, really. Hard to watch when certain folks withdraw from the grandkids, but we carry on. People commented with sympathy, little heart emojis, and questions, and I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the screen, stunned. She was talking about me. The woman who'd babysat through flu seasons, who'd driven carpools when they couldn't, who'd quietly covered the gas bills in winter, suddenly painted as selfish, absent, uncaring. And what cut deepest wasn't even Joy's words. It was the silence from Miles. He never defended me, not once. Sacrifices are easy to forget when they're financial. They leave no scars, no photographs, no anniversaries. But they pile up, and I carried every single one. When Miles and Joy bought their house, they were short on the down payment. I wrote a check, $20,000. They promised they'd pay me back when things settled. That was 7 years ago. Since then, I've covered summer camp fees, music lessons, sports uniforms. I chipped in for their new SUV when the old one wasn't safe enough. I even slipped money into their account during that family trip they took to Florida, the one I wasn't invited on. Each time, I told myself it was for the kids, for the family, that love wasn't about keeping score. But love, it turns out, can be twisted into an obligation you never agreed to. The breaking point came in public, as it often does. Not in the quiet of my kitchen, not in the loneliness of Christmas morning, but in front of others, where the humiliation carried weight. It was at another cookout, late summer. Neighbors gathered, kids splashing in the kiddie pool, burgers smoking on the grill. I had brought corn on the cob, butter dripping down the foil. I was sitting with the kids, helping the youngest untangle a popsicle wrapper, when I heard Joy's voice carry across the yard. "She doesn't really help anymore," Joy said, loud enough for the group near her to hear. "She used to, but lately, it's like she's not interested. Maybe she's tired." A woman nodded. "It's hard when parents age." Joy sighed, dramatic, shaking her head. "Exactly. We try not to burden her. It's just, the kids miss her, you know? But you can't force people to show up." My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the popsicle. Force people? Show up? I had been there. Every day. Every night. Every call. And here she was, rewriting my life in real time, painting me as the absent one. I wanted to stand up, shout across the yard, list every dollar, every mile, every sleepless night. But the words stuck in my throat. I felt my cheeks burn, the way a child feels when scolded in front of strangers. So I sat there, silent, the popsicle melting sticky in my hand. And that night, when I came home, a letter was waiting in the mailbox, a letter from the bank. It was thin, ordinary looking. I almost tossed it in the pile of junk mail, but I opened it and my breath caught. It wasn't addressed to me, it was addressed to the estate of Marlene Whitaker. My estate, as if I were already gone. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. It was some kind of error, a clerical slip maybe. But the implication dug deep. Someone had triggered this. Someone had filed something under my name that shouldn't have been filed. And suddenly, the picture sharpened. Joy's talk of downsizing, Miles's silence, the vague posts, the erasure. This wasn't just disrespect. This was maneuvering. They weren't just pushing me out of holidays. They were preparing to push me out of my own life. I sat there, the letter glowing under the kitchen light, my chest tight. The corn I'd brought home from the cookout still sat in its foil, untouched, growing cold. And for the first time in years, I felt anger. Not just sadness, not just disappointment, a clean, sharp anger that cut through the fog. Because if they thought I was powerless, they hadn't seen the papers I still had. The manila folder, the lockbox key, the records my husband had told me to keep safe. Everything was shifting, and I knew. This was only the beginning. The letter sat on my kitchen table for 2 nights, untouched, but never leaving my sight. The estate of Marlene Whitaker. Those words carved into me like a chisel against stone. It wasn't a mistake. Deep down, I knew. Someone had filed something. Someone was already preparing for me to disappear, and they thought I wouldn't notice. The 3rd night, I pulled out the old lockbox. It had been tucked in the back of my closet for years, wrapped in a blanket like a relic no one was supposed to touch. My late husband, Charles, had left it to me with a quiet warning. Someday you'll need this more than you think. Keep it safe, Marlene. Don't trust anyone else with it. Inside, the papers were still crisp, smelling faintly of cedar and ink. Deeds, bonds, life insurance policies, and at the very top, a copy of our will. Not the one Miles thought he'd seen, not the one Joy believed she could maneuver around. This was the real one. I traced my finger over the words. The house, the savings, even Charles's pension. They were safeguarded, protected, and more importantly, the house was never fully Miles's to claim. Charles had signed a clause, tucked neatly in the 3rd page, stating that as long as I lived, no one, not even our children, could force a sale, a refinance, or a claim against it without my explicit consent. The house, my life, my independence were mine. And I realized then, Joy wasn't just trying to erase me. She was trying to usurp me. I knew I couldn't face this alone, so I called Eleanor, my sister. We met in the back booth of a diner we'd loved since high school, its cracked vinyl seats and smell of fried onions grounding me in something real. I slid the papers across the table like contraband. Eleanor adjusted her glasses, scanning the words. Her eyes widened. Marlene, do they even know about this clause? I shook my head. I never told them. Charles said it was better that way. Her lips tightened, the kind of smile she wore when she was furious but trying not to show it. Then you hold the cards, sis. They've been playing games on a board they don't even understand. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. Don't let them write you out. Make them hear you. For the first time in months, I felt my spine straighten. I didn't invite them. They invited themselves. Mom, Miles said one Thursday, his voice warm but rehearsed. We'll come by Sunday just to talk. Joy wants to make sure you're comfortable, you know. With the future. I almost laughed. That Sunday, I set the dining table. Not with food, no roast, no potato salad. Just the lockbox centered like a silent witness. When they arrived, Joy's perfume filled the air before she even stepped inside. She carried a clipboard, always the organizer. Miles followed, sheepish but complicit, his eyes flicking to the table. We sat. Mom, Joy began, her tone syrupy, we've been thinking a lot about your situation. The house is big. Too much for you alone. And, well, we've talked with some people about options. Downsizing, assisted living. She smiled as if she were offering me a vacation. I let her talk. Every word was a stone in the wall she thought she was building around me. Finally, I slid the folder across the table. Read this. Joy frowned. What is it? Our will, I said evenly. The real one. Charles's and mine. You might find it enlightening. She opened it with a flick, scanning quickly, her eyes darting like a hawk's, and then her face froze. What's this clause? She asked, voice tight. Miles leaned in, brow furrowed. What clause? I tapped the page. The one that states this house cannot be sold, mortgaged, or claimed by anyone without my consent. Not you, not Miles, not anyone. As long as I live, this house is mine." The silence was electric. Joy's smile cracked, revealing the steel underneath. "You hid this from us?" "No," I said calmly. "I safeguarded it. There's a difference." Miles looked between us, confusion etched on his face. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you never asked," I said softly. "And because I knew someday someone might try to take what wasn't theirs to take." Joy slammed the folder shut. "This doesn't change reality. You can't stay here alone forever. You'll get sick, you'll fall, and then what? You'll expect us to pick up the pieces." Her voice grew sharper, the veneer peeling away. "You're being selfish, Marlene, holding on to things that should be passed down. You think this house loves you back? It doesn't. It's just bricks. And you're—" She stopped herself, but the word hung in the air anyway. "You're old." I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. "This house does love me back, because it holds the life I built, the life your husband grew up in, the life you married into, and it's not yours to rewrite." Joy's cheeks flushed red. She turned to Miles. "Say something. Tell her she's being unreasonable." Miles's lips parted, but no sound came. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years, my hands folded steady on the table, my eyes unflinching, and something shifted in his gaze. I leaned forward, voice low but firm. "You think I've been weak, invisible, but I've kept every record, every dollar lent, every check written. I've documented everything, Joy. And if you try to move against me, I won't be the one painted as absent. I'll be the one holding the receipts." Her eyes widened. "I know about the down payment, the SUV, the camps, the lessons, every dime. I never asked for it back because I believed it was love. But if you want to turn this into transactions, then we can tally the ledger. Shall we?" Joy's composure cracked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched like a rope pulled taut. Eleanor, who had insisted on sitting quietly in the corner just to observe, finally spoke. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I think Joy's been writing a story about you, Marlene, but she forgot. You're still holding the pen." Joy stood, pushing her chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I said softly. "It's only just beginning." Miles rose too, slower, torn. His hand hovered as if he wanted to reach for me, then dropped back to his side. They left without another word, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the picture frames. When the silence settled, Eleanor leaned over, her eyes fierce. "You turned the tables. Did you see her face? She didn't expect you to fight." I nodded, though my chest was tight with a strange mix of victory and sorrow. Because the truth was clear. This wasn't just a battle over a house. It was a battle over memory, legacy, identity, and the war had just been declared. I sat back, staring at the lockbox still resting on the table, its papers safe inside. For the first time in months, I felt the ground beneath me solid again. But I also knew Joy wouldn't retreat quietly. She'd regroup. She'd plan. The next move would come soon, and when it did, everything in this family would either break apart or be reborn in fire. The morning after that stormy Sunday, the house was still. The kind of stillness that feels earned, like the quiet after a hard rain. I brewed coffee, buttered toast, and let the smell of cinnamon drift through the air. For once, my hands didn't shake when I set the mug down. I had not raised my voice. I hadn't needed to. The truth had spoken for me. By Tuesday, the phone began ringing. Not just Eleanor, though she called daily, her voice warm as a quilt, but cousins, neighbors, even the church ladies who somehow knew before I'd said a word. "Joy's been carrying on," one of them whispered. said you ambushed her, said you've lost your sense. But underneath the gossip was a new note, doubt. People were beginning to see what I'd felt for so long, an edge in Joy's smile, a hunger in her politeness. Miles hadn't called. That silence hurt more than Joy's anger. Yet part of me understood. He was wrestling with the truth. About me, about her, about himself. Sometimes silence is the sound of someone's foundation cracking. On Thursday, I heard footsteps on the porch just as the sun was sinking, painting the sky pink and lavender. When I opened the door, Miles stood there, shoulders slumped, looking 10 years older. "Mom," he said softly, "can I come in?" We sat in the living room, the air heavy between us. He looked at the family photos on the wall, the Christmas mornings, the birthdays, the ordinary days I'd framed to remind myself life was worth keeping. "I didn't know about the will," he said finally. "Joy, she made it sound like we had to secure things, that we were protecting you." His voice cracked. "I didn't ask enough questions." I studied his face, so much of his father in the angle of his jaw. "You didn't, Miles, but you're here now." He covered his eyes with his hand. "I'm sorry, Mom." I reached across, placed my palm over his. "Don't be sorry. Be better. That's all I ask." The following week, I heard whispers at the grocery store. Joy had snapped at someone in line. At church, she'd left halfway through the service, face pale, lips pressed tight. People notice when a mask slips, and Joy's was slipping fast. She stopped calling me, but she couldn't stop others from seeing the truth. For every cold glance she gave, every strained smile, folks compared it to the woman they'd known before. They remembered me, my casseroles at potlucks, my laughter in the pews, my years of showing up quietly, steadily, and people began to choose sides without me ever asking. I started small, tending my roses, sitting on the porch swing with Eleanor, sipping iced tea, accepting invitations again, to Sunday suppers, to quilting circles. And everywhere I went, people said the same thing: "We've missed you, Marlene." The words healed places I hadn't realized, were bruised. For so long, I'd believed the story that I was fading, that I had nothing left but to shrink. But now, piece by piece, I remembered I was still here. 2 weeks later, Miles asked me to come to dinner at their house. I hesitated, but Eleanor nudged me. "Go," she said. "You deserve to be seen." The table was set beautifully. Joy always did have an eye for presentation, but her eyes didn't meet mine. She poured water, passed the bread, every gesture clipped. Halfway through the meal, Miles cleared his throat. "Mom, I want to thank you for everything you've done for us, for me." He looked at Joy, then back at me. I think I lost sight of what really matters. I won't let that happen again. The silence that followed was thick. Joy's fork scraped her plate, her jaw tight. I met her eyes, not with anger, but with something steadier. Compassion, maybe. "Joy," I said gently, "I don't want to fight you. I never did. But I won't be erased. This family, it isn't built on paper or possessions. It's built on love, and love only lasts if we protect it." Her face flickered. Anger, shame, perhaps even hurt. She looked away. That night, as I walked to the door, I pulled a single envelope from my purse. Inside was a copy of one page from the will, the clause that safeguarded me. I set it on their entryway table. "This is yours to keep," I told Miles, "so you'll never forget what your father wanted. He trusted me to carry it. Now I'm trusting you." Joy glanced at it but didn't touch it. Miles picked it up with trembling hands. I opened the door, the cool night air brushing against my cheeks, and before I stepped out, I said one last thing, soft but certain. "This house is mine, but my love has always been yours. Don't lose it." And with that, I walked into the quiet, the stars overhead steady and sure, The train rocked gently beneath me as it pulled westward, its whistle fading into the night. I sat by the window, forehead resting against the cool glass, watching towns blur into shadows. My suitcase was small, just a few clothes, a journal, and the old locket my mother had given me. For the first time in years, I traveled light, not just in luggage, but in spirit. Each mile the train carried me felt like a thread snapping free. The anger, the guilt, the questions, all loosening their grip. I sipped the lukewarm coffee the porter offered and let myself smile at the thought. Here I was, 68 years old, finally chasing something just for me. I had signed up for an art class at a community center 2 states over. Nothing fancy, just charcoal, paper, and time. But the very act of it, the choice, was my declaration. A way of saying, I am still alive. Before I boarded, I'd written 3 letters, one for Miles, one for Joy, one for the grandchildren. To Miles, I wrote of my love and my hope, that he would rise above the storm, that he would lead his children not with control but with kindness. To Joy, I wrote plainly that I forgave her, but I would not excuse her. That forgiveness was not the same as forgetting, and trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. And to the grandchildren, I wrote the longest letter, about family, about respect, about the courage to stand on your own 2 feet. I slipped in a line I hoped they'd carry with them long after I was gone. The way you treat the ones who raised you is the story you're writing about yourself. The days on the train stretched and softened. I woke early, journaled by the sunrise, and spoke with strangers who carried their own quiet burdens. One woman was leaving an old job she'd given 30 years to. Another man was visiting a brother he hadn't spoken to since '92. Everyone, it seemed, was searching for something: freedom, forgiveness, or just the next right step. It reminded me I wasn't alone, that life is full of people quietly remaking themselves, even when no one's watching. 2 weeks later, I returned home. The roses had bloomed in my absence, pink and defiant, as though reminding me beauty grows even when you step away. Miles came by that evening, the kids in tow. They tumbled into my arms, their laughter a balm. Joy stayed back, her expression guarded but softer than before. She didn't speak much, but she didn't need to. Sometimes silence is its own apology. We sat around the kitchen table, the same one that had held so many meals, so many arguments. This time it was just hot cocoa and cookies. Simple, quiet, unforced. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Looking back now, I see the truth I'd been too tired to face. Family can wound you deeper than anyone else because you've handed them the sharpest knives. But family can also heal if you dare to hold up the mirror and say, this is who I am and this is what I deserve. I had spent years bending, believing love meant shrinking myself. But love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to stay visible, to stand tall in your worth. One night, sitting on the porch swing beneath a silver moon, I wrote the final words in my journal. Words I'd want my children and theirs to carry when they thought of me. Respect isn't inherited. It's chosen day by day. And the greatest freedom you'll ever know is the moment you stop waiting for someone else to see your worth. I closed the book, exhaled, and for the first time in a long while, felt wholly at peace.